Like many of you, I grew up in a church, a lot like this one. And like many of you, I sat in chairs at little desks just like this one in Sunday school and learned about creation and Noah and David and Goliath, and was first introduced, probably through watercolor posters like this one, to the person of Jesus. And because I was raised in a Bible-believing church, I was given a New Testament, even as an infant, before I could read. My parents, they bought me this very Bible for my 12th birthday. And like many of you, I was quite accustomed to large family altar Bibles. They're on the end tables, they're on the bookshelf, and in fact, my grandma was rather faithful in reading hers all the time. But if we were to get really honest, you know, the kind of honest that you get behind closed doors just for a few minutes, I had grown up around Bibles. I had gone to church faithfully. My parents took me 3 times a week. But if somebody were to ask me to tell them the story of the Bible, I would have really had a hard time. The truth is I knew lots of little stories. I knew about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I knew about Daniel in the lion's den. I knew about the prodigal son's return. But if you would have asked me what comes first, Nehemiah or Hezekiah, I would have had a real hard time knowing whether or not Hezekiah was even in there. And if it was in there, what good was it doing in there? Oh, at my church, we were good at saying that every part of Scripture is inspired. But on a given Sunday, if I would ask people to raise their hand if they knew what Obadiah was about, most people would have quietly looked around and waited for the 1 or 2 Bible scholars and highly devoted Christians in the group to rescue all of us by hiding our ignorance once again. My name is Jeff Hyman. I'm the lead pastor of Friendship Baptist Church. And that church is situated just south of Detroit, Michigan in Lincoln Park. And when I was here at Friendship and dealing with the people, even people that had grown up in church like myself, what I found was, in large part, people were very familiar with the smaller stories of the Bible, but never really knew how to put the Bible together into one big story. It really is a mosaic, and we ourselves are a part of that story. The people here at Friendship, like in most churches in America and quite frankly around the world, knew to be good. They knew to be moral. They knew that swearing was bad and that drunkenness was wrong. That they knew they needed to be devoted to a congregation faithfully. But in the greater issues, the real purpose of life, God's redemptive history, in large part, our congregation remained ignorant. Most people were too ashamed to admit that they didn't know how to craft that story, how to tell that story, even to their grandchildren if they were asked. So we set out here at Friendship over about the last 7 years to try to put together the story in a way that people could understand, so that people could see the connectivity of each of the small stories that had been deeply implanted in their hearts and lives by their parents and grandparents, even while being sung to in a nursery rocking chair. All of a sudden, people began having aha moments where they saw that the 10 Commandments were in fact connected to the book of Galatians. They saw how Genesis chapter 3 is ultimately fulfilled in the book of Revelation. They saw that the story was greater than themselves, and their lives began being altered by it. We're putting a conference together, and that conference is all designed around the idea of teaching Christians from multiple churches in any denomination that are genuinely interested in hearing, knowing, and repeating the Bible story. Christians that will take a few days out and do the hard work of listening and even perhaps putting themselves out there in retelling portions of the story. Grace Baptist Church is kind enough to invite me down to share this experience with them. The experience that we've had here at our church has been a radical blessing to our people. Both members of our church and members of other churches have been radically blessed by taking the time to put together the story at long last. The Bible is more than a collection of singular moral stories telling everybody to be good, to not swear, to not chew, and not go with girls that do. This is a much richer story. This is the greatest story ever told, and God is graciously allowing you and I to be a part of it. Won't you please take time at the end of this month to join us at Grace Baptist Church for a chronological Bible story and conference, because God's story is awesome, and by the way, it's your story too. Mount of thy unchanging love.